Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you a story that will leave you speechless. Let's meet Cassian Holloway, an Air Force officer who died for 5 minutes and came back with a revelation that will shake everything you knew about Jesus and the true purpose of life. What he discovers on the other side will transform your outlook on death and love in ways you never imagined. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Get ready for a journey that will challenge your beliefs and open your mind to a new reality. My name is Cassian Holloway. For years, I served as an officer in the United States Air Force, coordinating logistical operations at high-level bases. My work was guided by logic, rigor, and science. He believed that everything in life could be explained through calculations, statistical predictions, and advanced technology. I never considered myself a religious man, nor a spiritualist. For me, anything that couldn't be proven was mere speculation or superstition. I grew up in the American Midwest, in a strict family where values such as discipline and responsibility were unquestionable. My father, a Navy veteran, always said that weakness was a luxury men like us couldn't afford. My mother, a mathematics teacher, reinforced this belief by teaching us that the universe operated through fixed and immutable rules. The concept of faith never had a place in my life. In the Air Force, this mentality has only strengthened. The military structure was predictable. Every action had a reaction. Every order was followed by a response. Uncertainty was not part of our world. When someone told me about spiritual experiences, about life after death, about God, I would smile politely and change the subject. I didn't have the patience for that kind of thing. I was a practical man. But everything changed the day I died. The first time I heard someone say I had died was when I woke up in the base hospital. One of the nurses, who seemed in shock, murmured that I had been dead for 5 minutes. 5 minutes in which my heart had stopped. 5 minutes in which my brain was supposed to start shutting down. But something happened. Something I couldn't explain. If you had asked me before this event if I believed in near-death experiences, I would have laughed in your face. He would have said they were hallucinations, effects of the lack of oxygen in the brain, erratic firing of nerve impulses. But now, I know there is something beyond what we can see. This is the story of the day I died and what I saw on the other side. It's the story of the most real thing I've ever experienced in my life. The morning that everything changed started like any other. My alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., like I did every day. Within 5 minutes, I was up, changing into my workout clothes and heading out for a run before sunrise. The cold air of Colorado Springs. It cut my skin, but I liked the feeling. It was like a reminder that my body was alive, strong, disciplined. After a 5-mile run, I headed straight to the base gym. My training consisted of weightlifting and resistance exercises. I always believed that the body was a machine, and machines need to be well looked after to function properly. But that morning, something was wrong. While doing a set of bench presses, I felt a slight tingling in my fingertips. I ignored it. I continued training. Breakfast in the base mess hall was simple: scrambled eggs, whole grain toast, black coffee. But as soon as I started eating, I felt unexpectedly dizzy. It was as if my vision went slightly blurry for a moment. I blinked a few times, tried to take a deep breath. The tingling that had previously been in my fingers began to travel up my arm. Temporary numbness, probably a pinched nerve during training, I thought. This was nothing unusual. The human body sometimes had small discomforts for no real reason. I got up, grabbed my coffee, and headed to the office. At 8:30 a.m., I was sitting at my desk, reviewing strategic reports for an upcoming operation. The day was as ordinary as any other. The screens flashed with maps and statistics. The room had the slightly chemical smell of bad coffee from the vending machine. The General Robert Lansing, my superior, came in for a brief update. He always maintained impeccable posture, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice firm and controlled. "Holloway, we have a meeting with High Command at 10. I want you to finish analyzing the supply report before then." "Yes, sir." He gave me an appraising look. "Is everything okay with you? It looks a little pale." "Yes, sir. Just a bad night's sleep." He nodded and left. I should have heeded that warning, but my pride didn't allow it. The tingling increased. A strange weight settled in my chest. When I tried to get up from the table, my vision became blurry, as if the air around me had become thick. The environment began to spin. My last sight before everything went dark was my assistant, Sergeant Miller, getting up hurriedly, with wide eyes. Then, the world disappeared. When I woke up, I felt a slight pressure on my forehead, a feeling of heaviness, and a strange sense of disconnection. The sound of voices around me seemed distant, as if coming from somewhere far below the surface. I tried to open my eyes, but my vision was blurry. My senses were messed up, as if I was submerged in murky water. The hospital smell of disinfectant and the cold light of fluorescent lights told me where I was, but in a strange way, everything seemed unrecognizable. It wasn't the hospital where I had been treated so many times before, but at the same time, I knew it was there. I was lying on a stretcher, surrounded by equipment and monitors. I tried to move one arm, but it felt heavy, like it was stuck. My eyes slowly adjusted, and when I finally focused, I saw the base's medical team running from side to side, working frantically. Cassian, Accord. It was the voice of Dr. Elias Whitmore, the base's chief doctor. I saw his eyes, normally so calm and collected, now panicked. He was next to me, doing something to my chest. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my words wouldn't come out. I heard the constant beep of the heart monitors, but as I looked, I saw something I didn't immediately understand. The graph was flat, a straight line without any movement. I knew that at that moment my heart had stopped beating. Clinical death, I thought, but I couldn't understand how I could be aware of this. Then I realized it was no longer inside my body. Somehow, I found myself observing the scene from one point above from the bed. I was floating in the air, as if I was being pulled upward towards a different place. I saw my body motionless on the stretcher below me. As the medical team desperately tried to revive it, I was completely separated from flesh and bone, and for an instant, a feeling of serenity took care of me. It was like somehow I knew I was safe, that there was no more pain. Trying, with an invisible force, I tried to speak, to scream, to get the doctor's ICARM attention, but they didn't listen to me. It was as if I were a ghost, a formless presence, unable to interact with the physical world. I watched helplessly as they continued to work, not noticing my absence. And then something strange and indescribable had happened. One light began to form around me. It wasn't an ordinary light, not like a lamp or the sun. It was a living, pulsating light, as if it had its own energy, something that invaded every cell of my being. I felt attracted to her, not in a forced way, but as if she called me, unintentionally, or perhaps by a force beyond me. I began to float towards this light. It grew, enveloping me completely. It was comforting, welcoming, as if the existence hugged me. I knew that there was no need to be afraid. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was being guided by something or someone who loved me deeply, like I had never experienced. This light, by enveloping me completely, transported to something far beyond physical reality. The sensation of movement through the light was inexplicable. It was like nothing I had ever experienced. There was no gravity, no time, no space as we know them. I saw nothing but the light that seemed to exist in all directions, but at the same time, there was the immense depth, a feeling of infinite expansion. It was as if I were traveling inside something that was at the same time the all and the nothing. The tunnel of light began to form before me, but it wasn't like an ordinary tunnel. To the cores, they were indescribable. There were tones that could not be replicated by any earthly color palette, a kaleidoscope of pulsing, dancing lights. Some colors were in motion, merging and separating with a fluidity I never imagined possible. Blue, green, violet, and gold, all of them mixing together in patterns that seemed to have own life. I couldn't understand how something so beautiful could exist. The feeling of total tranquility, it took over me, and all the tension I had built up over the years, all the worries I had always carried, just disappeared. There was nothing more to do, nothing to resolve. I was at peace, in a peace that was far deeper than any physical rest. There was no pain, there was no suffering. I was free. As I advanced through this luminous tunnel, I realized that something beyond light was also surrounding me. Suns. They were soft and harmonious melodies, as if the colors of the tunnel themselves were playing a song. It was not an ordinary song, but something primordial, a song that was in perfect balance with the universe. I couldn't identify a specific instrument, but the sounds were so pure and sweet that it seemed like they moved inside me, touching the core of my soul. Furthermore, a perfume sweet and invigorating, Like an exotic flower I had never smelled before, it permeated the air around me. He wasn't just a smell. It seemed to be directly linked to my sense of well-being. It was as if he himself, universe, I was feeding myself with this fragrance, filling me with something indescribable. The notion of time disappeared completely. There were no clocks. There was nothing to measure the passing of moments. The experience felt timeless. I didn't know how long I had been traveling through that tunnel, nor how long I still had to go. It didn't matter. I knew that there was no rush. I was going where I needed to be. Finally, in the distance, the tunnel opened, and an even more intense light, it completely enveloped me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I was coming to some kind of end or beginning. And when the light dissipated, I realized I was no longer inside a tunnel. I was in a place completely different. The place I found myself in was indescribably beautiful, a scene that defied comprehension. There weren't enough words in any language I knew to capture its essence. Around me there was a garden, but not an ordinary garden. The flowers that grew there had vibrant colors that seemed shine for themselves. They were not flowers like the ones we know on Earth, but flowers that emanated a own energy, as if they were alive in a way I never imagined possible. Each petal pulsed with a soft light, varying colors I had never seen in my life. Yew trees around them, they had an immense and mysterious presence. Their leaves did not sway with the wind, but seemed vibrate with its own melody, a silent song that filled the air around me. The floor beneath my feet was not earth, but a smooth, translucent substance that reflected the colors around me, as if the entire environment were a single manifestation of vibrant energy. The sky above was not blue, nor any color that I would associate with the sky we knew. It changed constantly, with soft tones and in motion, something like a aurora boreal that moved slowly, gently, as if the sky itself were breathing. The air was perfect, light, filled with a deep peace that seemed to touch every part of me. Every breath I took filled me with a sense of being in absolute compliance with everything around me. It was when I started walking through the garden that something even more inexplicable happened. I saw something that left him paralyzed for a moment. Among the trees, in an area with flowers that radiated a golden light, there was a figure, a version of myself, but he was not the man in the military uniform, skeptical and rigid. It was a younger, more happy. He was running among the flowers, with a wide smile on his face, like a child playing without any worries. It was as if my lost childhood, the one I had forgotten during the years of training and discipline, was there, alive and shining. I watched him for a while, feeling a deep longing. I had become so rigid over the years, lost all the lightness and joy that this version of me had. The man I was now could no longer play or indulge in the simple pleasure of exist. The weight of duty and responsibility was always with me, and this had made me hard. As I looked at that younger version of myself, something in my heart broke. There was a sadness in me, a pain I didn't know I carried. I wondered why I had abandoned that pure joy and lightness that this child represented. He looked at me for a moment, and as he did so, I felt a deep connection with him. It was as if he was calling me to return to what I had lost, to find again the essence of who I was before the world shaped me. The feeling of longing was immense. I wanted to run to him, hug him, feel that moment of purity, but something stopped me. One presence greater seemed to guide me, to lead me further. And then, as I walked deeper into the garden, I felt an incomparable energy, a feeling that I was being guided to something deeper, something I still needed to understand. It was then that the presence revealed itself. It was not a visible figure in the human sense, but a palpable energy, a soft, intense light that seemed to emanate from every corner of the garden. The feeling of being observed for something much bigger than me, something that knew everything about me. It was almost overwhelming. There were no words, no shapes, just an immense presence who radiated a peace and wisdom that I didn't know existed. The light had no defined origin, but was everywhere around me. It was not blinding, but enveloping, as if it were penetrating every cell in my body. I didn't see with my eyes, but I felt it deeply. It was as if I was part of this light, and the light was part of me. There was not a figure, but a living energy, vibrant and full of absolute love. I knew I was facing something divine, but I didn't know how it manifested. In one smooth movement, the light approached of me. I knew, and with indescribable clarity, that she understood completely. Every thought, every memory, Every sensation I had ever had was within sight of this presence. There was no secrets. There was no judge. Acceptance was total and unrestricted. I didn't need to explain anything. There were no words, no accusations, just a huge hug from unconditional love. Cassian, you're home now. The voice was not heard with the ears, but felt inside me, filling every part of my being. There was no timbre or shape of sound, but the understanding was clear and profound. It was like I was being embraced by a universal truth. The presence did not appear in human form, not as a familiar figure, but there was something deeply familiar about its energy. I felt like I already knew her, that I had felt her somewhere before, long before my life on Earth, something that transcends human perception of time or space, one true that could never be explained, just lived. Fear is the absence of love, Cassian. These words echoed in my mind, like a deep echo that settled in my heart. I felt the words, not just heard them. It was a revelation that touched my soul. Fear, insecurity, everything that had controlled me throughout my life seemed to be illusion faced with this truth. Love is the energy that holds everything together. Cassian, I knew that this was not a simple phrase or religious teaching. It was not a theoretical idea. It was an absolute truth, one energy that moved the entire universe. Love, and only love, had the power to transform, to heal, to give meaning to all existence. Your every choice, your every action, shapes the reality around you. You live in a world of choices. Cassian, every decision is a reflection of your connection with light, with love. I was silent for a long time, absorbing every word, every sensation. I couldn't express in words what I felt, because words couldn't convey what my alma was experimenting. I knew that this knowledge was not just intellectual. It was something deep, instinctive, visceral. Every cell in my body was in tune with this truth. Fear does not exist. It is just the absence of love, an illusion that you create yourself. When you understand this, Cassian, you will be free. I didn't know what exactly that meant, but there were no more doubts. Somehow, all my concerns and insecurities, they seemed ridiculous in the face of this immense understanding. I knew there was something more in the universe, something much bigger than the physical world, something that cannot be touched with hands, but which is real in a way that defies all human logic. The presence moved away slightly, but the energy continued present. I knew that this experience, this meeting, I was transforming deeply. Something in me had changed, and it would no longer be possible to go back to that man I was before. It was then that the light slowly dissipated, as if it had accomplished its mission. I knew my journey there was not over, but something in me, an invisible force, guided me away from that place. I looked around, and the garden seemed to move away from me, as if I were being pulled back into a reality that no longer felt like mine. I felt a tightness in my heart, an inner resistance. I didn't want to leave that place. I didn't want to leave peace and others' light. But a voice inside me, stronger than any human will, told me that my mission on Earth was not yet complete. There was something else I needed to do, something more that I needed to live. With one last look at the garden and the presence of light, I began to be pulled back into my body. It was not a simple sensation of physical return. It was more like my alma was being pulled back by force. The light was moving away, and the feeling of to be it was slowly dissolving. What once seemed so clear and certain became increasingly hazy. The tunnel of light began to close, and darkness took its place. I felt the weight of my body, the limitations of my physical existence, enveloping me again. A feeling of tilt internal formed inside me. I wanted to remain in that state of peace and understanding, but the responsibility of life on Earth called me back. The last thing I felt was an energy wave crossing me. I knew I was returning, but I also knew that my spiritual journey would no longer be the same. I had received something from invaluable, something that could never be forgotten, and then, the emptiness, the feeling of being pulled into the body with immense force as if he were being torn between two worlds. I woke up with a shock. When I opened my eyes, I saw a familiar face. Dr. Whitmore was there, standing next to me, with an expression of astonishment. The other doctors were agitated, moving from side to side. I heard the beep of heart monitors going off in every direction, but the strangest thing was the expression on faces from them. They were looking at me like I was a miracle. 5 minutes? Cassian, you were dead for 5 minutes. I couldn't speak. The words just wouldn't come. I couldn't understand how that was possible. What I experienced, it felt so real, so vivid, that it made no sense that my body was still there, breathing, living. I tried to process everything that had happened, but my brain felt in shock. I knew that my experience could not be explained, not by the laws of physics, medicine, or science. I had been transported to another plane, and everything I believed up until that moment seemed irrelevantly small given the magnitude of what I experienced. Strangest of all was the deep feeling of happiness that took care of me. I knew something immense and transformative had happened, something that could not be explained, something that changed completely. I knew I was back, but in a different, with a clear purpose in mind. That's when Dr. Whitmore spoke, with a tone of disbelief in his voice. "Cassian, you have recovered completely. There is no brain damage. What happened to you?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain transcendental experience that I lived. There were not enough words to describe the peace, a wisdom, and the love that I had found. But one thing was certain. I would no longer be the same man who walked into that hospital. I knew I had something else to do, something much bigger. It was at that moment that I realized my mission on Earth was not over. I had something to learn, something to teach. The following days were a mix of confusion and clarity. While my fellow doctors marveled at my unexpected recovery, I was in internal turmoil, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. That experience wasn't just a sequence of events, it was a revelation. I knew something deep inside me had changed, but how to put it into words? What had I seen and felt? I could barely comprehend the entirety of it, and yet I knew that my world would never be the same. I was still in the hospital, but the physical recovery seemed to have been the simplest part of the process. The doctors said I was fine, that I was completely healthy, but what no one knew was that a new perception of life took care of me. What I had witnessed during those 5 minutes outside my body now seemed more real than anything else. I could palpably feel a feeling of deep connection with everything and everyone around me. It was as if a candle had been lit inside me, illuminating every corner of my soul, showing me a universal truth that before seemed so distant to me. That same afternoon, General Robert Lansing paid a visit. He was standing in the doorway of my room, with a serious expression, but there was something in his eyes. He knew something had happened, but he didn't know exactly what. He was never a man of faith, and I doubted he would be able to understand what I experienced. Still, he came in and sat next to my bed. "Cassian, you don't look the same anymore." He said this with a tone of concern, but also a hint of curiosity. I could tell he was trying to understand, but at that moment, what I wanted most was to find words to explain the inexplicable. "I'm not the same, General." I didn't know how to start, but I knew I had to be honest, even if I couldn't give all the answers. I saw things I can't explain, experiences that make no sense to the world we know. But I stopped. I looked at him and then continued. "I know that life is not just what we see with our eyes. There is something much greater, something that transcends this entire system that we are used to calling reality." The general looked at me suspiciously, but also with an opening touch that didn't exist before. He, who had always believed that everything could be resolved with discipline, logic, and strength, was now faced with something he could neither control nor understand. "Cassian, you were once the best officer I had, but if you're saying that it changed you, then maybe it's time to reconsider everything you thought you knew." I knew his words weren't coming from a place of judgment, but concern. He didn't know how to process this, nor did I, but I knew that my path was elsewhere. After that day, a feeling of urgency took care of me. I could no longer continue my life the way it was before. Military life, with its rigid structure and control, no longer made sense. The value system that I had followed for so long now seemed empty, fragile in the face of the truth that had been revealed to me. I knew my mission wasn't in an operations room or on a battlefield, but something much deeper. I then decided to take a step that seemed impossible: leave the Air Force. It was a difficult, but inevitable decision. The life I knew no longer belonged to me, and instead of seeking more success in the military field, I wanted something more significant, something that spoke to my soul. That's when I decided to move away from the world physical, to dedicate myself to spirituality and to service to others. I started studying religions, philosophies, and practicing meditation. Every day, it seemed like I was more in tune with something invisible, but present, something that guided me on my new journey. The following months were an emotional roller coaster. I was moving further and further away from military life, and what was once such a strong identity for me now felt like a burden. Over the years, discipline, strength, and logic had been my anchors, but now those anchors seemed to be sinking me. It was difficult for me to explain to others, especially my family, why I was giving up everything. My father, who always taught me that honor and responsibility were the greatest virtues, couldn't understand. My mother, who has always been a rational and focused woman, simply looked at me with a look of silent concern. My decision to follow a spiritual path wasn't easy for anyone, but not for me. I knew I was looking for something deeper, something that could no longer be ignored. I had been transformed for the experience I had, and now I needed to share this with the world. But I didn't know how to start. Eleanor Caldwell, my ex-girlfriend, was the first person I spoke to about my experience. She always had a more open view of spirituality. She always believed that there was something beyond logic. The relationship between the two of us had ended years before, mainly because of my relentless skepticism. I thought she was naive, even though she was the most honest and kind person I had ever met. But when I met her again after the incident, I realized she had something I didn't: faith. She didn't ask me any questions, nor did she demand answers. He just looked me in the eyes and said, "I knew something big was about to happen to you, Cassian. You will finally understand what I have always said." She was a pillar of support for me throughout my journey. With her by my side, I began to explore new ways of understanding. I took courses on meditation, participated in spiritual seminars, and began to delve into books on philosophy, religion, and self-knowledge. Every new concept I learned connect more deeply with the truth that I had experienced in those 5 minutes of death. Each piece of wisdom I absorbed seemed to fill a gap within me, a gap I didn't even know existed until that moment. Despite all of Eleanor's help, I found myself isolated of many people who were part of my old life. My military colleagues, my friends from before, all they were skeptics or even worried. Conversations with them were difficult. Some even told me directly that I was having a crisis of faith, that I was losing the focus and discipline that had been the pillars of my life. They couldn't understand, and often I felt alone on this new path. But at the same time, something new blossomed within me, a feeling of purpose. I was no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. I was no longer tied to the expectations of others. The weight I felt before having to meet goals and objectives, it no longer made sense. I was in search of something bigger, and every step I took seemed to bring me closer to that truth. It was in one of those moments of solitude and introspection that I decided that, instead of straying further from my mission, I should start to share what I experienced. The words seemed to escape me, but I knew I needed to help others to find the same kind of clarity and peace that I had found. I decided to get involved in social projects and of mentoring, helping people who were going through difficulties or who were looking for something deeper. I told my story, not as a person who had all the answers, but as someone who, after have been touched by the truth, I wanted to help others see what I saw, that the life has a purpose, which the love is the force that connects us all, and that we can overcome any fear if we are willing to accept and cultivate love. And then my new journey began, not as a military leader, but as someone willing to serve others, to help illuminate the paths of those who were searching for answers, just like I was before. Over time, people's reactions began to change. Some still looked at me suspiciously, others curiously. I knew my life change wouldn't be understood by everyone, but I still felt like I was doing the right thing. The volunteer work I started doing gave me a greater purpose. When helping in shelters, orphanages, and even marginalized communities, I realized how much people were looking for something more. They were trapped in their own struggles, fears, and insecurities, just as I had been. I soon realized that my experience was not unique. There were other people with similar stories, others who had gone through transformers. I started to connect with them, to hear their stories. The similarities were striking. We had all faced some kind of deep crisis, a crisis that led us to question everything we knew about the world, about life, about our own existence. But, like me, everyone had come out of this process more strong, more connected with the true of the universe and with the power of love. It was in this environment of care and exchange that I began to truly understand the power of share the human experience. No matter the origin, no matter the trajectory, we are all touched in profound ways by moments of pain, loss, and renewal. I had been transformed by death, but now I realize that true transformation happens when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and help each other to find meaning and purpose. I also began to understand that by sharing my experience, I was not only helping others, but it also helped me. Every talk I gave, every conversation I had with someone looking for answers, made me reconnect with the light I had found in that heavenly garden. With every word, with every gesture of affection and understanding, I was strengthening my own faith in what I experienced. During this period of renewal, I found a new friendship. Eleanor, who was always my friend and companion in spirit, became more than that. She, who always believed in me, was my greatest emotional support during this transformation. She never pressured me to be someone I wasn't, and that was crucial. She accepted me unconditionally, as a soul that was searching for its true purpose, not just in words, but with actions. Our friendship has deepened in ways I never imagined possible, and with her by my side, I felt stronger, more able to deal with the situation. Skepticism that still surrounded my journey. However, there was always the distrust from some people from my old life. The General Lansing, although more distant, still seemed to not fully understand the decision I made. In our sporadic meetings, he seemed to want me bring back to the battlefield, as if he believed I was wasting my potential by walking away from military life. But I knew my real battle wasn't in a physical war. My battle was in the internal struggle for the truth and the love. One day, after a meeting with him, where we had a heated discussion about my new choices, he said, "Cassian, I don't know what you saw, but I know you well. You have always been a man of action. Are you sure this journey will take you somewhere?" I looked at him with a calm smile. The answer came effortlessly. "Yes, General. This journey takes me to my true self, and in the end, that's what matters." I knew that my journey would not be easy, and that there would be challenges and obstacles ahead, but the certainty that I was on the right path was unbeatable. I was no longer looking for anyone's approval. I was looking for a connection deeper with the universe, with the people around me, and with the truth that was revealed to me. I knew this mission was mine, and I was ready to follow her, with all the love and courage I now carried within me. As the months passed, I began to realize that the transformation within me was not only affecting me, but it was also spreading to those around me. My old friends, who initially saw me as strange, began to notice something different in my energy. Although some were still suspicious, many approached me with a new kind of curiosity. I was finally beginning to understand what it meant to live a life authentic, without the need to please or follow standards that no longer resonated with me. It was at one of my mentoring meetings, at a community center in Denver, that I met a woman who would further change the direction of my journey. His name was Amelia Foster, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a calm and welcoming energy. She had lost her faith after her daughter's death in a car accident and was going through a deep spiritual crisis. She came to my support center looking for answers, something to fill the void that life seemed to have left after the loss. When I first met her, her pain was so evident I could almost feel it physically. She seemed to be carrying the weight of all the pain in the world. She told me, through tears, about her daughter, Natalie, and how she had been the light of his life. The pain of loss was something I couldn't fully understand, but I knew there was a way to help alleviate that suffering. I knew that love, as I was taught, could be the key. On first dates, Amelia was skeptical. Like me, she had been a practical woman, always focused on work and day-to-day responsibilities. The spiritual was something distant, something she had never considered in her life. But as we shared our stories and talked about healing and faith, she began to open her heart. I never forced anything on her, but I let her feel the words that I shared, for her to see the impact of the change that had happened in me. During one of these meetings, she sat me down and said, "Cassian, something is changing in me. I don't know how to explain it, but something inside me is starting to move." I smiled at her, knowing exactly what she was feeling. It was the same feeling I had, that impulse to hope arising from the deepest despair. I encouraged her to follow that feeling, to allow her to connect with something bigger. A few weeks later, she had a life-changing experience. During a quiet night of meditation, she had a vision of your daughter, a vision in which Natalie smiled at her, peacefully. Amelia woke up from that experience with her eyes full of tears, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of liberation, tears of treatment. I knew that moment was the beginning of something very big for her, and as I witnessed her transformation, I felt certain again that my purpose was to help people find that inner peace, that connection with the divine that was within everyone's reach. It didn't matter what they had been through or how much they had suffered. Love was there, always available. They just needed to look within, seek the light that exists in all of us. Over this time, I began to receive more invitations to give talks, talk about the experience I had lived and the lessons I learned. Every time I spoke to a full room, every time I shared my story, I felt like I wasn't just helping others, but also healing myself. Every account of a near-death experience I heard, every story of loss and overcoming that was told to me, deepened the understanding that we are all connected for something much bigger than ourselves. I was no longer looking for external answers, but allowing myself to live according to the inner truth that now guided every step of my life. And as this process continued, I knew my work was just beginning. Every person I met, every life I touched, was a new opportunity to bring light and love to the world. I was finally fulfilling the mission I was given, to live with purpose, love, and understanding. As time passed, my transformation consolidated. The emptiness I felt before it, that feeling of being lost and directionless, was filled by a feeling of unity with the universe and with the people around me. The fear that always accompanied me, the fear of failing, the fear of being vulnerable, was dispelled by sure that love is the only truth. Every person I met, every conversation I had, showed me more and more how interconnected we are. No matter our origin or our past mistakes, we all have the ability to transform our lives through choosing to live with love, compassion, and understanding. My new mission, more than a choice, has become a need. It didn't matter how many times I encountered resistance, how many people doubted me or called me an idealist. I knew there was something much bigger at stake. I was helping others realize that the love and light they were inside them, just as they were inside me. The experience I lived, the one that I changed from a relentless skeptic to someone willing to listen and embrace the unknown, it wasn't something I could keep to myself. It was a message of hope, of treatment, that there is always a way back to the light, no matter how dark the path seems. I continued my work with mentoring, sharing my story, my spiritual journey, and the impact that a near-death experience has had on my life. I started working on a book to narrate everything I learned, with the hope of reaching even more people. In my talks, I saw many people with eyes full of tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of understanding, of acceptance that something greater awaited them beyond the pain and darkness. And as I looked at my own life, I knew my mission would never end. Every choice, every loving action I took, every opportunity to share my truth was part of a continuous process of transformation, not just for me, but for everyone around me. I had awakened to the truth that our life on earth is a journey of spiritual growth, and each challenge is an opportunity to connect more deeply with the divine. But most significant of all was what happened to my own view of death. Throughout my life, I have always feared her, thinking she was the end, a line that separated our existence from nothing. Now, I saw death not as an end, but as a transition to something greater, something that was always present, yet invisible to human eyes. I knew that the real journey was not in what happened after death, but in what happened while we are alive. Every moment, every choice, every act of love we practice is the true measure of our existence. Today, more than ever, I feel in peace. The transformation that I experienced, and that I continue to experience, is not something that will one day come to an end. I will always be in a process of evolution, of discovery, of deeper understanding of my connection with the universe and with those who share this journey. And by sharing my experience, I feel like I'm fulfilling the mission given to me, to spread love, light, and the truth that we are all connected by something greater, something that transcends everything we know. Now, as I look to the future, I see life no longer as a straight line or a predictable path, but as a flow steady, a journey of constant learning and growth. Each new day brings a new opportunity to live with purpose, for offer love, and for help others to find the same deep understanding about life and the universe. Because, in the end, the only truth that really matters is the transforming force of love. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.